Hello everyone, welcome to this video where I will be showing you one of the greatest games I've ever seen. This game was against Praggnanandhaa against Wenjun in the Tata Steel chess tournament in Waikensei. This is round 9, and if Pragg won this game, he would be tied for first. I think this game is very important because it shows that you can attack without exposing your own weaknesses. And yeah, without further ado, let's start. So Pragg opens with e4, and Wenjun responds with e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, going for the Italian game, and Wenjun replies with knight f6. And usually white players play d3, but Pragg decides to go for knight g5, which already is not very common. It's the fried liver attack, and the goal is to strike on the f7 pawn and try to get an advantage. So Wenjun played correctly and opted for the move d5, and this is still theory. After e takes knight a5, bishop b5, c6. Pragg took on c6, b takes c6, and bishop d3. So we reached a position where both pieces are developed for white and two pieces are developed for black. Black's knight on a5 is a little misplaced, but it will come back into the game, while white is underdeveloped on the queen side. And so it's a balanced game here for both sides. And black plays knight d5, threatening to take the knight on g5. So Pragg here plays h4. And this move kind of tells black that, hey, okay, so I'm gonna attack on the king side, and what are you gonna do about it? So Wenjun replies with queen c7 because she noticed that Pragg played h4, so maybe he's gonna castle on the queen side, and I want like rook b8 and start an attack here. So Pragg replies with the novelty b3. And during the live coverage of this games, all the commentators were shocked because b3 had never been played before. But Pragg's idea is very simple. He wants to bring his bishop to b2 and attack this pawn here. And while it's a novelty, it makes perfectly logical sense. So Wenjun, after thinking for 10 minutes, plays the move h6. And we have knight e4 here, f5, kicking the knight again, and knight c3. f5 was a mistake. Wenjun should have opted for bishop e7, but after f5, knight to c3, white already has a pretty substantial advantage. So Wenjun declines the trade with knight f6, and white plays bishop b2, continuing to develop. Bishop d6, keeping an eye on the e5 pawn and developing. And white plays knight a3. Knight a3, I think, is a great developing move, eyeing knight c4, which will be played eventually in the game. And it opens up the idea of castling longside even further. Black replies with e4. So the bishop is under attack. So right now it seems that the white bishop is under trouble, but Pragg, of course, had calculated everything and plays the great move queen to e2. So, of course, black cannot take the bishop because his king is under a pin. So, black castles, now threatening to take the bishop, and Pragg plays the great move bishop a6. And, of course, Wenjun replies with bishop e6. If she were to take the bishop, queen takes a6, and already you have a feeling that the queen is great, the pawn on c6 is slightly weak, the knight on a5 is misplaced, and knight c4 will be coming eventually. So Pragg would have a great position. So bishop e6 was played, and knight to c4. So Pragg is already making great advancements in his position and threatening to take the bishop on d6. And Wenjun replies with bishop b4. So this is not an important move, important situation per se, but this really shows that Pragg hasn't really done too much except for playing b3 and h4, but he hasn't like sacrificed a knight or gone crazy just to formulate an attack. So right now the position seems pretty normal. His bishop is a little out of the picture here, but so is the black knight. So this foresights a trade, and Pragg goes for the initiative and castles longside, saying to Wenjun that, okay, I have a solid structure here, so you can't really attack my queen side, but are you sure about your king side here? And Wenjun says, don't worry, my knight on e5 isn't doing anything. Let me just play knight b7 now and consolidate, because if I remove this knight, then maybe I'll formulate an attack with a5, a4. So Pragg, of course, takes bishop b7 because his bishop on a6 wasn't doing great either. Queen takes b7. And now he starts to show Wenjun her weaknesses. And what I mean by that is, to a naked eye, this position doesn't seem all that bad for black. But in fact, black has overpushed the e4 pawn, and the c6 pawn is extremely weak. And so is the black king, because there's no f5 pawn, f7 pawn here, and the g file might be open to some attacks. So Pragg plays f3, hinting on a capture, and rook a e8. And Pragg is very calm here, because he doesn't want to take immediately, because after bishop takes, knight takes, black gets a good position with the open queen on b file and threatening to take the bishop, which could unleash some discoveries. So Pragg didn't want to do this. Instead, he thought for 14 minutes and played knight e5. And this seems like an unnatural move because it's kind of pinning his own knight to the queen after some trades. But in fact, this is the only way to continue in the position. And Wenjun here makes the fatal mistake, c5. Why this is a mistake? Because even though the c6 pawn was not great, it still provided the bishop to get some axis squares on d6 and e7 to help on the defense. But after c5, black can not get his bishop back into the game, and the knight on e5 seems absolutely tremendous here. So Pragg responds with rook he1, and see again, he is not making any committal moves. He's slowly building his attack, move by move, improving his position. And Wenjun plays e takes f3, and Pragg decides, both captures are okay. Pragg decides to play gf3. Queen f3 would be, it's not a bad move, but then you would just trade all of your pieces and wouldn't have an attack. So gf3 played, and now hinting that he will bring his rook to the g file. So knight h5 played. Wenjun wants this square on f4 for her knight, and possibly defending the pawn on g7. So Pragg plays rook g1 and c4. This was a sign of desperation, I believe, because the bishop on b4 isn't really doing much, so she wants to bring her bishop into e7, but in the meanwhile she is just sacrificing a pawn. So Pragg obviously takes on c4 and queen to e7. And might by might, white is building a substantial advantage. Pragg plays a3, telling Wenjun that, wow, you played queen e7, but now you don't have anywhere to go with your bishop. And Wenjun takes on c3, and bishop takes c3. And I want you to evaluate this position, because the bishop is great, the knight is fabulous, it might come to e5 or d6, the queen is on the open file, right? The rook is on an open file. The only piece that's not doing much is the rook on d1, but that might also come into the game. So because Ju Wenjun sacrificed her pawn with c4 earlier on, she decides to retake this pawn, which really only helps Pragg because it opens another file for him. So Pragg plays queen to e5, immediately threatening rook takes g7, knight takes g7, and then queen takes g7. So Ju Wenjun defends that with queen to e7, and now bringing the final piece into the attack, rook d to e1. And just look at this. Pragg is no material down. He has a fantastic position up against the e file, and all of a sudden he's asking he's asking black, what are you gonna do? So Ju Wenjun replies with queen d7, moving away from the e file, which could have posed her threats, and Pragg strikes his moment with knight to d6. Knight to d6, attacking the rook, of course, so the rook comes to e7, and in my opinion, the best move in the position. It's not a sacrifice, the best move in the game. It's not a sacrifice at all. It's just a simple move, queen to h2. And what is he threatening here? He is defending the knight on d6, but he's also attacking the knight on h5. And all of a sudden you see white's pieces just all eyeing this vulnerable black king, and black's pieces are very disorganized. So Ju Wenjun plays knight f6, defending her knight, and Pragg now not really sacrifices his knight, but plays queen to h6, the final killer blow, because threatening bishop takes f6, obviously. So Ju Wenjun plays queen takes d6, but still bishop takes f6. And on the 33rd move, Ju Wenjun resigns with black, giving Pragg a tie for the lead. And now why did she resign? Because even if she plays, let's just say, queen takes a3, king b1, Pragg's attack on the g7 pawn is not going to be difficult to defend, and in fact impossible. So Ju Wenjun said, okay, I don't want to play any further, so she resigned. But the rook on e7 is attacked, the g7 pawn is attacked, all of his pieces are doing great, he's not material down. And yeah, so she just resigned. So a couple of things to learn from this game. Of course, you have players like Tal and Fischer just sacrificing pieces to generate an attack, but Pragg really showed that an attack just doesn't mean sacrificing pieces. It means that you need to have your pieces perfectly placed on the correct squares. And that is a very valuable lesson learned from Tata Steel Chess 2024 Masters round 9, and we'll see what is to come in round 10. Thank you all for listening. If you like this video, please give a comment and subscribe. Thank you. Bye.